Hey, most WoW players think they're bad because of slow reactions, missed globals, or bad execution. While that's sometimes true, it usually starts way earlier. Bad keybinds. If you watch average players, they are not failing because they can't press buttons fast enough. They're failing because their setup forces them into bad situations before the fight even starts. Their keybinds fight their movement. We will jump into games shortly, and I will explain how your keybinds shape your movement, your ability to react to situations, and ultimately improve your performance. If you are actually new to WoW, you are in the fortunate position to start without bad habits that even I, someone who optimized keybinds for years, still carries with him. Let's start with my Resto Druid first, the character who actually influenced most of the keybinds you see today. Hey, so now we're in game and you might notice this is not a Resto Druid. And the reason for that is it's actually the second time I record this video, and while recording it the first time, I came up with a much better concept for the video, and so we do it again. The Demon Hunter spec Devourer is new in Midnight, and I actually had to redo the keybinds for this new spec, and it's much more recent example of how good keybinding can look. We will look at my Resto Druid later because there are different challenges with different classes, and Druid is famous for having a lot of different abilities, and keybinding is a lot more important on a Druid compared to a Demon Hunter, which, as you might notice looking at the screen, there's a lot of free space in my bars because this class does not have many abilities, so the spellbook is actually quite empty compared to a Druid at least. And yeah, so let's talk about keybinding. The first thing you need to understand is that in WoW you usually move with WASD. So this is your movement keybinds, and you want abilities that are frequently used close to your movement keybinds, so you can actually press them while you are using your movement keybinds, and do both move and do damage. So the absolute prime real estate keybinds are actually 1 to 4, at least for me, because I can't reach 5 very easily, and then Q, E, R, T, F, and theoretically X and Y as well. The reason I don't have X and Y bound is because I actually have them bound to the standard of drawing and sheathing your weapon and sitting down and standing up, which is kind of a meme among my friends because, yeah, well, they are actually really good keybinds, prime real estate keybinds, and I have them bound to basically useless stuff. It's just that I used this ability, used these key bindings like this since vanilla, and I kind of don't want to give them up. But this is an opportunity for you to improve on what I already achieved, in the sense that you can rebind your sit down and sheath to some useless keybind that you'd never use, and use X and Y for very good keybinds. Alright, so we already established that we want to use our main abilities close to WASD. In case of a Devourer Demon Hunter, that's actually the ability Consume, and it's even more important on this class to have it at a good keybind because you can actually move while you cast Consume. So having absolutely free movement while you do that is very important on this class. And the next ability you want to use is actually your I-Beam, so I have bound it to 4. 4 is a pretty good keybind as well. You can basically jump and move in any direction before you press it. And then usually my next and most important key that I press a lot is like Q. So that's why I have this Eradicate bind to Q, which is like this ability. The first two keybinds, 1 and 2, is actually a relic from my Havoc playstyle. I have Throw Glaive and this Fellblade / Voidblade jump ability on 1 and 2. So basically you can move these to any keybind that works for you. I just have it like this because this is in muscle memory. So I played Havoc for a considerable amount of time. 37 days and 16 hours is played Havoc on this character. And 1 and 2 has always been these two abilities, so that's why I have them there. The same goes, by the way, for Vengeful Retreat, but there's another reason Vengeful Retreat is on this kind of keybind. First of all, using A and D and strafing like this, combined with your W, gives you a very free kind of movement. The only direction which is difficult to go is actually backwards. So you cannot press S because it's very slow. So in most cases, unless you are dodging the void really like 2 steps out of the way, you can just do like S and go back. It's very nice to have an ability that you can use with your hand without using your mouse. Say you want to use your mouse to like select a target or something like that, and you need to dodge a void. So Shift D is a very good keybind for that, because your hand is already on like A or D or W, but mostly A or D. and then you can just add Shift to it, and Shift D is very good keybind to like disengage. So next you need to think about what are keybinds that you want to keep consistent across your characters. For me, one of the most important ones is actually the interrupt. So this interrupt is usually used on a cast, and then the cast from the enemy stops. This is how interrupts work in WoW. So now you need to think about which keybind is very good because it needs to be pressed very fast. You need to react very fast to interrupts, especially in PvP, but in Mythic Plus sometimes as well. So it needs to be on a good keybind without a modifier, so R it is. And it needs to be consistent across characters so that you can build muscle memory. And you don't have to think about it. If you want to interrupt, I just press R. The same goes, by the way, for my defensive cooldown, which is on Shift T. All of my characters have their defensive cooldown on Shift T, so that I don't have to think about it and it's easy to press. So the next thing I want to talk about is actually my movement ability. As you might notice, the keen-eyed among you, that I have my movement ability twice in my bars. I have it once on 3, like this, and I have it once on the mouse button. And this is actually a macro. As you can see, it says jump, so it's actually macro, so that I can just jump to my cursor position without like having this kind of targeting circle. Let's wait for the cooldown a second. So without having the targeting circle, and it's very instant in the sense that I can instantly use it to like dodge mechanics, while this one would require me to select the location where I want to go to, and it's much slower. So that's why I have it twice. And in general, I would advise to have movement abilities on your mouse buttons. The reason is that for dodging mechanics and being really fast and precise with your movement, you actually need to press WASD in WoW to do that. And even if you just move your finger for a little bit to a different key, like let's say E, for example, if you have your movement ability on E, even if you do that, you lose a slight millisecond, maybe a few hundred milliseconds of speed on that ability. Meanwhile, being able to move completely in any direction with WASD and using your mouse right click press down so that you can turn around like completely freely, you can actually use your mouse button in any direction and very fast at that to dodge mechanics. So that's why I would advise having movement abilities on your mouse button. Okay, last but not least, and this is actually true for so many people, your mount ability should not be on a very good prime real estate button. Yes, you use your mount very often, so it should be on a good keybind because you like it would be annoying to press like I don't know, let's say 8 to mount up. But it should not be on a keybind that is crucial for your reaction speed. So it should never be on a keybind that is non-modified. In my case, I have my mount on Shift R, which is like a very good keybind, but it's not a prime real estate keybind because pressing Shift R, I actually um, have to put my fingers away from WASD. So it's not like a keybind that is used for a very crucial ability. Um, but it's still good enough that I can easily press it. What you should not do, what I see many people doing, is like having mount on, say, F or Q. Worst case, Q is like it's actually a crime to have your mount on Q because you lose such a good value key. It's like not a good decision. Okay, for the next part of this video, we'll actually swap to my Resto Druid. Alright, here we are on my Resto Druid, and as you notice, I changed my layout so that you can see my keybinds a bit better. Probably should have done that on my Demon Hunter, but there weren't many keybinds to explain anyway. It's a lot different with Druid because the spellbook looked actually like this, so we have multiple pages of stuff that we need to fit in our bars, and it used to be even a lot more. I think at one point in the game, if you bound everything, Druid had like 41, 42 abilities, which is like actually 4 rows of buttons, basically completely filled up, which is like 12 in a row. Yeah, 12 in a row. So yeah, again, Druid keybinding is a very different obstacle to tackle compared to, say, a Demon Hunter or um, a Frost Mage or something like that, who don't have many keybinds. So, why do I switch to my Resto Druid for the last part of this video? Because I actually want to explain something that is mostly true for Druid, but might come into play for some other classes. The thing is that Druid has like form swap. So basically, if you go to Bear, your action bar 1, and now if you go to Cat, your action bar 1 changes with your form. And usually it's bad habit to actually have your form on the action bar 1 because you kind of lose prime real estate with that. But I'm kind of getting used to, or got used to, do it like this because of Arena. I basically had my bear on shift 2, I think, but I had to swap it to E where I had regrowth before. So was actually like this when I initially started, and then I noticed shift 2 is not a good enough keybind to play bear in arena because you need to be very fast. So yeah, I had to swap it around. And a further addition that I noticed, and this is true for many casters, if you have an ability that is casted, you need to stand still anyway, so you cannot move. So having it close to like your WASD is actually kind of useless because you cannot move anyway, so you jump into a direction and then you cast and then you stand still. So it kind of doesn't matter on which kind of keybind it is because it doesn't need to be a very fast, very quick to access keybind. So one thing I want to show you is what you noticed here is that my R is actually empty in my bear form, and the same goes for the cat form. This is because Druid Heal had interrupt, and interrupt is usually on my R, so I don't have it here. And Druid Healer never had interrupt on human form. So this is why R is actually bound to a healing ability like Life Bloom. This is quite interesting if you think about how you design your characters, that it sometimes can be beneficial to leave buttons empty in case that Blizzard adds the ability to press an interrupt on your class, and you are used to having it on R, for example. On the other hand, it's kind of dumb to not use prime real estate keybinds, like in this case. Leaving the R open for multiple years would be stupid because this class needs keybinds. I have many abilities, and yeah, binding my life bloom to R in this case is, I think, the better decision compared to leaving it open. So you notice that I have a few holes in my action bars. Um, One of the reasons is that there is class pruning, and I lost abilities. So this used to be Cenarian Ward, and it was my trinket, I think, during Shadowlands. I think this was trinket, and then this one is basically my Healthstone. I haven't had the access to Healthstones on this character during midnight, so that's why I have not bound it yet. But once I get one, this will go here. So the last thing I want to show you, and something you might notice if you look closely, is that I have, for example, Convoke twice on the bar. The reason for that is that Shift Q used to be my Tree of Life, and Tree of Life and Convoke are now a choice node, so I can get either or. But my muscle memory of pressing these buttons like thousands, maybe tens of thousands of times is so high that I cannot run like Convoke on Shift Q or vice versa, run Tree on Shift D. It's just too much engraved into my brain. When I want to go into Tree, that I press Shift Q, and when I want to press Convoke, I press Shift D. This is kind of like what I meant when I say I have some bad habits that you might be able to fix in your layout, because obviously you don't have this muscle memory and you don't need to like have the same ability twice on the action bar. The reason bear is twice on the action bar, for example, is that in my balance spec. So in my balance spec, you can see that my ability Wrath is on E, which is quite important as a DPS player to have your most used damaging spells on your best keybind. So Q and E, 2, 3, 4 are usually the prime real estate keybinds for that, for your rotational spells. And I just had to move Bear away. I used to start playing a balance like this, having like Wrath on Shift E, but it kind of felt awkward. So I had to change it around. And since I had the space on my Resto Druid, I decided to add the ability just a second time on the bar. The reason for that is that obviously while playing hundreds of hours of balance, I kind of built muscle memory on pressing Shift E. Shift E is not an optimal keybind for Bear, by the way. So this got me killed like once or twice in the course of hundreds of raids, because I wasn't able to shift fast enough into Bear when the mechanic like surprised me. So basically, sometimes there are mechanics in the game where you need to be full life to tank the mechanic, and for some reason, I don't know, maybe you failed, you stepped into a void or stuff like that. you lost a little bit of HP. And as a druid, the optimal play in this case is to just go bear and then have more life and tank the mechanic in bear, or even press frenzied regeneration to regen your life, and then shift out of bear once the mechanic is over. So shift E is a bit awkward, so it's a bit slower than just pressing E. But yeah, it kind of worked out good enough for me to play it like this. So before we end this video, I want to say like a few abilities that you should consider putting on the same keybind on all of your classes. The first one we already talked about is your interrupt. It's obviously one of the most important spells in the game, especially if you are playing M+. The second most important is probably your defensive cooldown. For me, it's like Shift T. If your class has multiple defensive cooldowns, you can either like find a solution for yourself that works. Like, for example, let's say you have no ability on your Demon Hunter for Shift C. So, and you have your, I think it's Blur on Shift T, and then you can add your Darkness on Shift C. I think my Darkness actually on Shift V. Not sure. So yeah, your defensive cooldowns can go on different buttons, but your main defensive cooldown, the one that you should use most of the time, should go on the same keybind on every class. The next thing is actually Dispel for healers. So your healer dispel should always be on the same button. This is quite important because in many situations, dispelling quite fast is crucial to like surviving or crucial to actually mastering the boss fight. So having it on a good keybind, one that is not modified, and having it accessible to you on all classes on the same keybind is quite important, especially if you're multi-class or like split rate or stuff like that. And one ability that is, again, very useful to have on a similar keybind on all of your classes is your movement ability. For me, currently, that's Wild Charge. And again, on a mouse button, it's very good because you can freely move while you are able to press this button. And that's quite important for movement abilities. So clothing swords, in my opinion, you should bind all of the abilities that you are using in combat. It does not matter if you use it like once every 50 fights, but have all of your abilities bound. And I go even a step further and have some of the abilities that I use frequently out of combat. For example, my Hearthstones and my teleport to Dreamwalk is bound. For a longest time, I had even my food bound. This is especially important if you play Arena, because sometimes you need to like you barely get out of combat and then you want to press your food. One more thing is obviously the interface, like how you set up your bars on the visual side. And this is something I want to talk about in a different video. But basically what you see here now, so the first row or the first action bar is obviously the keybinds that I used first in WoW. And then the second row in order is basically the keybinds that I invented later. And then these keybinds all came like years later of playing WoW, where I noticed that I need much more keybinds and came up with these. In general, key binding is a very personal thing and you need to find a layout that works for you, of course. But in general, my advice would be to bind every key that is possible to bind. And especially on a class like a Demon Hunter, you can basically bind everything. So just so you know, before recording this video, I actually removed a bunch of stuff from my action bars on my Demon Hunter to make the visuals more clear to you, what kind of abilities are important for the class. But I basically have disenchant bound. I have multiple mounts bound on my Demon Hunter because I just have the real estate to actually do that. While on a Druid, you often do not have the ability to do that. Currently, there are 2 keybinds empty for me and this movement keybind. I basically never use these 2. These are bound for special abilities like setting a world marker, for example. No, I can't show that, sadly. I need to be in a rage to do that, but these buttons are usually used for like me setting up a world marker if I have to raid lead or like a special ability in a boss fight where I have an extra action button and I have a macro that binds it to one of these keys. So these are almost always empty in case I need them for like something special. All right, I think that's it. So this is my setup, and I hope I was able to give you some insights on how to improve on yours. For any game I start playing, keybinds are always one of the first steps I take to improve my gameplay from the get-go. They play a huge role in your overall performance. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. See you in the next one. Bye bye.